this really gonna do this again? Ha! It is giving me the option to this time. And hopefully I will see freaking comments over on this page instead of this one. And I just posted the link of where you can find our live videos. So, hello everyone, Jax West from Stephen Avery Project, Justice with Jax, and MAM Gossip. Let me put on my glasses. We are going live today. This is the second time we're live to read The Wrecking Crew. As I said last time, people assume because Kathleen is on the cover of this book that this is Kathleen Zellner's book. It is not. It is written by John Farrick. See there at the top of the book? John Farrick wrote this book. He was a reporter in Wisconsin around the time of this case, but he's actually from Joliet. Hello, Kimber. Yay, I'm able to see comments on this page too. Last time I couldn't. And hello, Snooze. So, but John Farrick is from Joliet, which is a town here in Illinois, and he's no longer in Wisconsin, but is back in Joliet. Good evening, Natalie, and hello, David. So while I read, I'm looking obviously at the book, so I may not see your comments. And let me just see on my other thing here. Somebody's got something they submitted. Okay. Jen's got her, sup, cat? Jen's got her book all ready to go. So while I'm reading, I'm mostly looking at the book. I won't see your questions or comments. So, but those of you who are knowledgeable in the case, if somebody asks a question that you can answer, please help them out. Answer their questions. I ask you, though, if somebody asks a question like, did anybody ever think that's not Teresa's everyday key, that you don't treat them like they're an idiot, because we get new people to the case every day who have not gone down all the rabbit holes and have all the information that those of us who have already done the research know. So just show them the way. They show them where they can get the information, answer their questions. Don't talk down to them, please. Where we left off is we are starting chapter 6, which is page 55 out of, there are 361 pages. Let me write that at the top of this little note up here. That's not counting pictures that are at the end of the book. Yo, Bryce! So I will be reading for 2 hours. So it is 1 p.m. Central. Make a note of that, people, that whenever I go live, almost every time I go live, unless something happened that day that's breaking news and I come on, I go live at this time. Whether or not it is here in Gossip, over on Stephen Avery Project, Justice with Jax, I try to keep the time consistent, because we've also found that I believe this time is the best time for people around the world. You know, that we can get the most people that want to listen can be here. So, because we get people all the time saying, when are you going live? It's always going to be at this time. Unless, like I said, breaking news. So, and I'll be going for about 2 hours today. And then I won't go read again until, I won't be doing it on Monday because that's Memorial Day, a holiday here in the States. So probably Wednesday next week will be the next time I go live to read the book. Christopher makes the events and he also posts the reminders. So, but unless I decide to do Tuesday, since we don't do Monday, could possibly do that. I don't know what my schedule is yet for next week. So maybe it'll be Tuesday and Wednesday. Kids in bed snooze. That's good. So, all right, let's get started. We are on chapter 6, which is titled Avery's Phone Call. Although he remained condemned to live out the rest of his days here on Earth inside a Wisconsin Department of Corrections prison cell block, Avery's spirits were high and his mood upbeat toward the end of 2017. After all, his prospects of regaining his freedom or gaining a new trial were stronger than ever, thanks to Zellner's energy and fighting spirit. But back in Manitowoc County, the skies were dark and growing more ominous. People were becoming unhinged as the master at overturning wrongful convictions was starting to reveal her cards. As he remained at Waupun, which we will be at for our rally at the end of July, hello Dawn Marie, Avery made a phone call to his sister, Barb, on October 24, 2017. Here's a synopsis of the call, which was recorded and included in the court record of Avery's post-conviction appeal. Oh my, am I going to have to try and do their voices? The call concerned the personal computer inside the trailer of Avery's sister, Barb. This was the computer that her son Bobby used to fuel his wicked sexual fantasies involving gore, violence, and death. "Why is all that shit on the computer?" Avery asked. "There was nothing on my fucking computer. All this, I didn't even have fucking internet back then," his sister lied. "Yes, you did." "No, I didn't." "What do you mean you didn't?" "No, I didn't have internet." "You did." "No, I didn't." "At that time you did. Before that you did." "No, I didn't." "You didn't? Well, it's on the computer." "I did not have internet." Well, nothing. I didn't." And the Oscar goes to. Zellner has pointed out to the court handling Avery's post-conviction appeal that, quote, Barb's vehement denial that her computer had access to the internet at the time of Ms. Halbach's murder is probative because it is unequivocally false, unquote. But why lie? Was Barb lying to protect her older son, Bobby? Was she content to see her youngest son, her feeble-minded son, Brendan, carted off to prison if it meant protecting someone else in the family for the murder? Prior to the confrontational prison call, one of Zellner's expert witnesses, forensic computer expert Gary Hunt, conducted a forensic examination of Barb's desktop computer. Quote, the computer was used to access violent images of young deceased females, rape, torture, incest, and pedophilia on the internet at times when only Bobby was home, unquote. Hunt's analysis also turned up evidence that someone inside the home had gone to great lengths to destroy information off the computer's hard drive. The computer record deletions were specific to the time frame of Teresa's disappearance and murder. Quote, Barb's denial is especially telling, given that she took steps to delete the disturbing images before police seized her computer on April 21, 2006. This is additional new evidence that supports Mr. Avery's claim that the recovered images on the Dassey computer meet the legitimacy tendency test established by Denny by implicating Bobby, the killer, in Ms. Halbach's murder, unquote. Not only did Barb remove incriminating evidence against her son, Bobby, the killer, she also apparently knew that Teresa left the Avery property alive during the afternoon of October 31, 2005. Quote, Barb and Mr. Taddock have recently made admissions that Ms. Halbach left the Avery property before the murder, unquote, Zellner revealed. These bombshell admissions came during the same recorded phone call of Avery and his sister Barb, October 24, 2017. Bobby's home, Stephen reminded his sister. He wasn't always home, she answered. Well, most of the time he was home. Now. Then, out of nowhere, a male voice interjected. He doesn't fucking know shit. It was the violent man from Manitowoc County who was eavesdropping. But why was Scott Taddock eavesdropping? Why was he so paranoid about his wife's conversation about Teresa's murder a dozen years afterward? As Taddock listened intently, Avery informed his sister that Bobby, the killer, saw Teresa leave the property. She left, Avery repeated. That's right, Scott Taddock interjected. Yeah, she left, Barb Taddock repeated. Yeah, Avery said. Yeah, his sister repeated. Well, Avery explained, he didn't testify for that. Zellner now had tape-recorded statements from Barb and Scott Taddock agreeing that Teresa left the Avery compound on her final day of life. Information that doesn't mesh with their original trial testimony. Quote, Mr. Taddock's response indicates either that Bobby had told him that Bobby, the killer, observed Ms. Halbach leave the property, or Mr. Taddock's response indicates that Mr. Taddock observed and or had contact with Ms. Halbach after she left the property, unquote. But if Taddock and Barb were now admitting Teresa left Avery Road, not realizing their conversation was being recorded by the prison, what does that say for the crucial trial testimony served up by disgraced special prosecutor Sweaty Sweat, main trial witness? Sweaty Sweat highlighted Bobby's testimony, the killer, knowing full well it was sure to be the highest televised criminal trial ever in Wisconsin. Quote, Barb and Mr. Taddock's admissions are crucial to Mr. Avery's defense because the most important eyewitness for the state was Bobby, the killer, who testified that Ms. Halbach was still on the Avery property and that he saw Ms. Halbach approaching Mr. Avery's trailer before he left, unquote. On the other hand, if Bobby, the killer, committed the murder, is it realistic to expect he would testify with truthfulness? Or would he lie on the witness stand, realizing a guilty verdict against his uncle served his own needs? Anyhow, here's how Taddock behaved during the October 2017 call between Avery and Barb, where Taddock was eavesdropping the entire time. Let me talk to the cock-sucking loser. Fuck him. All you do is the only evidence they got against him, and he's trying to gasp for air to blame it on somebody else. He's a fucking loser. I wasn't even on that property that day, you goddamn idiot. That's how fucking intelligent you are. You want to get out yourself so you can get out and do something stupid again, you dumb fuck. I can't wait to kick your fucking ass, fucking little fucker. Avery, I ain't scared of him. Taddock, you ruined my fucking life. You ruined my fucking name, dumb cocksucker. You fucking jailbird motherfucker. Yep. I hate that cocksucker. You ruined my life. Yeah. Avery reminded his sister how her husband was solely responsible for making outrageous false claims to the police, suggesting Avery was molesting her sons, including Brendan. It came from him, so he wanted the cops to put all the blame on me. So who would say something like that I did something to the boys? I don't know. I don't read none of this shit, okay? Yeah, that's why nobody wanted to read nothing and see about nothing. Any guilty person would say and try to blame it on somebody else. Oh, I was fucking with the boys? Now the conversation fueled Tadok's rage. Yeah, fuck him, the cocksucker. He's a stupid fuck. Going down to fuck your family when he got out of prison the first time, Tadok roared. Yeah, see? That fucker needs to be locked up. How about his mother? Avery asked his sister. Avery alluded to the fact that Tadok tried to attack his own mother during one of Tadok's domestics that resulted in an arrest. What about his mother? His sister inquired. This time, Tadok blew a gasket. He began screaming at Avery, loud as ever. Yeah? You talking about my mother, you cocksucker? I'll put you in the fucking ground. Yeah? Avery asked. Fucking bastard, Tadok screamed. I don't give a fuck. The cocksucker's a loser. He's grasping for air. The only evidence they got is against him. His mother had to call the cops on him, Avery reminded his sister. He never touched his mother, Barb professed. You stupid fucker, Tadok yelled. I already asked all of that, Avery told them both. Smart man you are. 36 years in prison. You know the world. I hate him, Tadok shouted. Avery's sister had enough. This needs to stop. It's going to stop when it's over. It needs to stop now. I can't, Avery said. Well, like I said, you will end up with a dead sister because I can't take this shit no more. Well, then shut the computer off then. Shut everything off. You don't need a phone. Just go to work. Yeah, okay, whatever. From Zellner's perspective, the heated phone call was revelatory. Quote, Bobby and Mr. Tadok placed themselves in the same location as Ms. Halbach when she received her last phone call. Mr. Tadok's multiple inconsistent statements severely undermine his credibility at trial. His recent telephone call with Mr. Avery demonstrates his knowledge that Ms. Halbach had left the Avery property on October 31, 2005. The October 24, 2017 telephone call also demonstrates that Mr. Tadok has violent, homicidal propensities manifested by his uncontrollable temper. Mr. Tadok threatens to physically assault Mr. Avery and, even more disturbingly, to put Mr. Avery, quote, in the fucking ground, unquote. Back in 2007, Special Prosecutor Swit glossed over the uncomfortable fact that the majority of Teresa's charred bones, supposedly burned at Avery's outdoor backyard pit on a cool autumn night, were never found. Practically all of her teeth were absent from Avery's burn pile pit. Meanwhile, some of the charred bones pointed to the neighboring property along Avery Road. Quote, it is an undisputed fact that some of Ms. Halbach's bones were found in the Dassey burn barrel, unquote, Zellner argued. Quote, no credible explanation has ever been provided by the state as to why Ms. Halbach's bones would be in the Dassey burn barrel if Mr. Avery had burned her whole body in his burn pit. Going on to next chapter. I try to drink water in between chapters. Chapter 7. Computer Blues. At the 6-month mark of the murder probe, Avery and his mentally challenged 16-year-old nephew Brendan were both incarcerated, but something wasn't right back on Avery Road. Wisconsin police were becoming intensely focused on Barb's desktop computer. This was the home computer, primarily used by her 19-year-old loner of a son, Bobby, the killer. The computer was kept inside his bedroom. But before Wisconsin's police got a search warrant to seize the computer, Barb Yandell was one step ahead of them. Quote, Mr. Avery had discovered new evidence that Barb hired a person to make deletions of incriminating evidence prior to the computer being seized by the police on April 21, 2006, unquote. Bolstering Avery's case, Brad Dassey, shed light on a conversation he vividly remembers taking place during a drive to the Sheboygan County Jail to visit his half-brother Brendan back in 2006. Quote, "My father, Peter Dassey, was with us. Barb stated that she had hired someone to reformat her home computer. She wanted to know if reformatting would remove what was on the computer. Barb admitted her computer had some pornography stored on it, and she claimed the computer had viruses on it. She had the reformatting done shortly before the authorities seized her computer. Barb commented that she did not think the person she hired knew what he was doing. She said she did not want anyone to get what was on her computer." Unquote. Brad Dassey said he, quote, "thought that Barb was trying to remove evidence relevant to Ms. Halbach's murder." The authorities interviewed Brad after he reported this information, but he was not called as a witness by either side to testify at Mr. Avery or Brendan's trials. Unquote. In July 2017, Zellner's computer forensic expert Gary Hunt unearthed some, but not all, of the dirty little secrets from Bobby Dassey's home computer. The missing files only deepen the mystery surrounding Bobby and the time frame in question. The home computer deletions were as follows: August 23 to 26, 2005. August 28 to September 11, 2005. September 14 and 15, 2005. September 24 to October 22nd, 2005. October 23 to 24, 2005. October 26 to November 2nd, 2005. November 4 to 13, 2005. November 15 to December 3, 2005. Of the computer files that were recovered, they paint a dark picture. Foremost, they undermine Bobby's, the killer, incriminating trial testimony as Kratz's first witness. Quote, "Bobby testified at Mr. Avery's trial that after he arrived home on October 31, 2005, from working the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift, he went to sleep until 2:30 p.m. Bobby's testimony is demonstrably false. Mr. Hunt has determined that the Dassey computer was used to access the internet at 6:05 a.m., 6:28 a.m., 6:31 a.m., 7 a.m., 9:33 a.m., 10:09 a.m., 1:09 p.m., and 1:51 p.m. Quote, "Bobby, the killer, was the only person home during those hours because his mother, Barb, was at work. Blaine and Brendan were in school, and Brian lived with his girlfriend." This is powerful evidence that Barb was aware that her computer had incriminating files on it that were relevant to Ms. Halbach's murder. Barb's efforts to delete the files before the computer was examined by authorities, in addition to her recent denials that she even had the ability to access the internet during the time in question, reinforces this conclusion. Unquote. Sorry, I'm going to skip these couple of paragraphs where he's just talking about another book he wrote. We're only going to cover the stuff pertinent to the case. Meanwhile, Zellner also believes the computer forensics found on Bobby's computer can connect the dots for Teresa's demise and dismemberment. Quote, "The forensic examination of Barb's computer performed by law enforcement did not permit law enforcement to detect Barb's efforts to delete computer records of 8 periods in 2005. The missing records, which were presumed deleted, were only discovered using 2017 forensic technology." Unquote. Had that information been known at Avery's trial, it could have been a game changer for the defense. Unfortunately, Avery's lawyers, Jerry Buting and Dean Strang, were operating in the dark. Quote, "Mr. Avery cannot be faulted for failing to detect Barb's efforts at concealment prior to his trial. In fact, as recently as October 24, 2017, Barb denied that she even had internet during this period of time. The evidence is material because it supports Mr. Avery's theory of an alternative perpetrator. There was no evidence elicited at trial concerning Barb's efforts to remove evidence of the Halbach murder on her home computer, unquote, Zellner said. But questions linger to this day. What had Barb come upon on her family's computer? Was she out to protect someone sinister in her family? Someone the authorities had chosen to overlook? Was she willing to sacrifice her relationship with Brendan in order to keep her other, more desirable family members out of law enforcement custody? Had someone in law enforcement or the prosecution team tipped her off about the upcoming planned search of her family's computer? Quote, shortly after my conversation with Barb, I contacted the authorities because I thought Barb was trying to remove evidence relevant to the Teresa Halbach murder from her computer, unquote, Brad Dassey said. Quote, I do not know who reformatted Barb's computer. I was interviewed by the authorities after I reported this information to them, unquote. Chapter 8. Bobby's Obsessions. The killer. The mystery person Barb paid to obliterate data on the desktop computer stored inside Bobby's, the killer's, bedroom on Avery Road did a good job, but the computer tech was not perfect, as outlined by Gary Hunt, the senior forensic examiner with Q Discovery. He has been certified as an Access Data Certified Examiner since 2012 and a Certified Computer Examiner since 2013. And there's his picture. Quote, at the time of the 2006 investigation, there were 3 leading forensic examination utilities: EnCase, Forensic Toolkit, and X-Ways. It is important to note that the platforms have significantly evolved since the 2006 investigation, unquote, Hunt explained. Quote, FTK specifically added new features and parsing capabilities, allowing for more efficient investigations and greater insight into the data at stake. Additionally, Internet Evidence Finder was not first released until March 22, 2009. The bulk of my analysis revolved around web activity, which was streamlined by the use of IEF, unquote. Approximately 12 years after Teresa's terrorizing death, Hunt uncovered startling new information on Bobby, the killer, Dassey's home computer. This information was not known to Avery's trial lawyers, Dean Strang and Jerry Buting. It also wasn't known to the producers and documentarians of the original Making a Murderer. This information was uncovered by Kathleen T. Zellner and Associates, but not until 2017. Quote, there was a single user account on the computer named HP Owner, Hunt found out. Quote, the HP Owner user conducted the following internet searches on various dates. Ready? If you have children, you may want to put on the earmuffs. And Facebook, please don't put me in jail for saying these words. I'm just reading what Bobby Dassey, the killer of Teresa Halbach, searched. Teen pussy, 11-year-old sex, 12-year-old sex, 15-year-old girl, 15-year-old girl naked, AAA teens, cute kid naked, fuck preteen girl, hot teen pussy, kid slut, kid sluts, naked teens, naked young girl, naked young pussy, nude teenage girl, nude teenage girls, preteen sluts, pre spelled incorrectly, PREE, teens naked, preteen boobs, preteen busty, preteen girl model naked, preteen girl nude, preteen girls naked, preteen naked, preteen pussy, preteen sex, preteen sluts, preteen girls naked, preteens naked, pre-teens naked, teen black pussy, teen girls naked, teen porn, teen pussy, teen redhead pussy, teen sex, teen twits, teen twat, teenage pussy, teens naked, teen spread wide open, wet teen pussy, young 13 girl nude, young 13-year-old girl nude, young 13-year-old naked, young 13-year-old naked, horse cum, car accident, car accidents, deceased, spelled incorrectly, spelled DESEISED. So deceased girls. Deceased spelled incorrectly a different way, DESSESED girls. Diseased girls. Drawned, so I guess supposed to be drowned, spelled incorrectly, DRAWNED. Drowned girls. Drowned pussy, drowned girl nude, drowned pussy, fast car accident, gun to head, spelled incorrectly, HAED, gun to head, knife, goes through skin, rotten girl, seeing bones, hot girls, and tempo car accident, unquote. At the time of these repetitious searches, Bobby, the killer, was 19 and worked the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift at the metal processing facility in Manitowoc, not too far from his home. From Bobby's, the killer's, bedroom computer, Hunt recovered 2 pictures, quote, in the unallocated space, the first showing Teresa Halbach and Stephen Avery, the second showing only Teresa Halbach, unquote. Both images were carved from the unallocated space of the computer hard drive. Since the files were recovered via data carving, there is no file system metadata available. In other words, the file's original paths, names, and creation dates, accessed or modified timestamps are not available. Quote, in conclusion, the computer was used to run internet searches, including but not limited to those identified in the previous paragraph and Exhibit B. Some images displayed as a result of the searches were clicked on by the user. Additionally, 2 photographs of Teresa Halbach were recovered from the unallocated space. These images do not have any date attributes or information suggesting how they arrived on the computer, unquote. Meanwhile, a law enforcement heavyweight who dedicated his career to putting ruthless killers in prison also came to Zellner's aid in her quest to regain Stephen Avery's freedom. Greg McCary is a distinguished retired FBI agent who teaches policing at Marymount University in Arlington, Virginia. He is a nationally regarded violent crime behavioral expert. He signed a sworn affidavit on October 23, 2017. Quote, I have reviewed the Wisconsin DOJ report summarizing the forensic computer examination of the Dassey computer. It is my opinion, based on this report, in addition to the report of Kathleen T. Zellner and Associates forensic computer examiner, that Bobby, the killer, Dassey's internet searches reflects a comorbidity of sexual paraphilias. The sexual and violent content he was searching for and viewing should have alerted investigators to Bobby, the killer, Dassey, as a possible perpetrator of Teresa Halbach's murder. The content of these images, combined with the obsessive use of the computer to view these images and Bobby, the killer, Dassey's entanglement in the investigation into the murder of Teresa Halbach, should have alerted the investigators to Bobby, the killer, Dassey, as someone having an elevated risk to perpetrate a sexually motivated violent crime, such as the violent crime perpetrated on Teresa Halbach, unquote. In hindsight, McCrary found it troublesome that Bobby, the killer, turned into a star witness against his uncle. Quote, the fact that Bobby, the killer, Dassey, became the key witness for the prosecution and that his testimony placed Teresa Halbach on the property walking over to Stephen's trailer after she completed her assignment interjected himself into the prosecution in a way that should have raised the suspicions of reasonably trained detectives, if that testimony is untrue. Based upon the affidavit of Brian Dassey, it appears that Bobby, the killer, Dassey's testimony was untrue, unquote. McCrary is regarded as a foremost expert witness in violent crimes. He worked at the FBI for 25 years. On the other hand, John Dietering, the Calumet County Sheriff's investigator who interviewed Bobby, had practically no real-world experience handling murder cases because it was largely cow country. In fact, Dietering even admitted during his questioning of Bobby, the killer, how he had basically shied away from entering the Dassey's property off Avery Road. The investigator chose to keep himself away from the inside of Bobby's, the killer's, garage, where Bobby, the killer, was dismembering a deer carcass that he chose to grab off the road shortly after Teresa vanished. The deer carcass was taken home by Bobby, the killer, after the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department had already made visits to Avery Road on successive days to interview his uncle, who denied any involvement in Teresa's disappearance and freely gave detectives permission to walk through his trailer to look for signs of foul play. Quote, in my opinion, a prudent investigator would have considered Bobby, the killer, Dassey, a suspect and would have investigated him as such, unquote, McCrary said. Quote, there is no evidence that authorities ever investigated, much less eliminated, him as a suspect or investigated the discrepancies in his trial testimony, unquote. After Dietering and Wisconsin DCI agent Kevin Heimerl finished their non-accusatory interview with Bobby, the killer, on November 9, 2005, they led him down a hallway to undergo a physical examination with Faye Fritsch. She was a nurse at the Aurora Medical Center near Manitowoc. Dietering noted he questioned Bobby, the killer, Dassey, regarding scratches on Bobby's, killer's, upper back. Bobby, killer, Dassey, stated those were due to his Labrador puppy jumping on his upper back. Quote, he stated he was bent down to put on his shoes this morning when the dog jumped up and scratched him, unquote, Dietering wrote. Quote, I did examine Dassey's shirt and could find no obvious holes or tears, unquote. The investigator spoke with Dr. Laura Vogel-Schwartz to get her assessment. Quote, she stated it was not likely they were over a week old. She stated it is her opinion that the scratches were fairly recent. The scratches to Bobby, the killer, Dassey's back were photographed. We did escort Bobby, killer, Dassey, from the hospital. He was released, and I observed him speaking with his mother in the parking lot, unquote. A baby Labrador puppy supposedly dug its claws deep into Bobby's back, the killer, so he claimed. Nobody in Wisconsin law enforcement ever bothered to follow up and investigate the veracity of Bobby's, killer's, claim. After all, the case's lead investigators, who had no business lurking around the Aurora Hospital, were intently focused on something far more important to them. They wanted to personally monitor the DNA collection from their new prisoner, Avery, who was being asked to submit fresh new DNA samples to the lead Wisconsin detectives, even though he was only being arrested on a charge of being a felon in possession of a gun, not murder. Prosecutor Sweaty Sweat would not charge Avery with first-degree murder and mutilation of a corpse until a week later, November 15, 2005. But why did Mark Wiegert and his sidekick Tom Fassbender of the Wisconsin DOJ need to collect more DNA samples from Steven Avery? After all, Avery had given up his DNA samples to the state of Wisconsin when he was serving state prison time for Gregory Allen's crimes. Nonetheless, Fassbender and Wiegert teamed up on the afternoon of November 9, 2005, to pick up Avery at his residence and bring him straight to the hospital where they could be inside the room as they observed. Sorry, got a text message. As they observed the events unfold. Quote, Stephen asked what the DNA samples were for, unquote, Fassbender's report showed. Quote, he was essentially advised that samples were being obtained from everyone that has been around the area and that they are used for standards for comparison. He advised that they already have his, unquote. Theoretically, if Wisconsin already had Avery's DNA samples on file in 2003, this raises a legitimate question. Why did Wiegert and Fassbender decide they needed to make a special trip to the hospital to take yet another DNA specimen from Avery? Also, why were Wiegert and Fassbender absent from the physical examination of Bobby and the collection of Bobby, the killer's DNA sample, yet the two were inside the doctor's office as so-called passive observers when the nurse took an abundance of additional DNA from Avery? Quote, after the physical examination, Faye Fritsch did the buccal swabs on Steven Avery. The buccal swabs were taken from Steven Avery's mouth at 1:51 p.m., and I saw Faye Fritsch place the swabs into an envelope and seal the envelope. The envelope contained the buccal swabs was turned over to me by Faye Fritsch at 1:53 p.m., unquote, Calumet Sergeant Bill Tyson's report showed. From there, Avery was taken into another examination room for palm prints and fingerprints. A correctional officer handed off those prints to Tyson at 2:10 p.m. Regardless of Avery's guilt or innocence, however, it appears that monkey business was going on at the hospital and that the registered nurse, Faye Fritsch, then 35, of Two Rivers, was complicit. Quote, during the physical examination of my body on November 9, 2005, the nurse took 2 swabs near my groin at the request of Calumet County Investigator Wiegert, unquote, Steve Avery said. Quote, I saw the nurse who took the groin swabs hand them to Investigator Wiegert as I was being taken out of the exam room by Agent Fassbender and the nurse. I saw Investigator Wiegert pretend to put the swabs in the hospital-type wastebasket, but I did not actually see the swabs leave his hands and fall into the basket, unquote. Fassbender's report noted that there were numerous small scratches, scars, and sores documented on Avery's body. This was all understandable since Avery did metal scraping at the salvage business. Quote, there was one particular wound that entailed a cut to Stephen's middle finger on his right hand. The cut had scabbed over, unquote. During the exam, Fassbender left briefly to fetch Avery a can of soda. Quote, Fassbender asked Stephen if he wanted something to drink, and he said he would take a soda. Fassbender left the room and got him a soda, unquote, which is always a trick they use to get your DNA and fingerprints. Unknown to Avery at the time, this was another way for Fassbender to obtain another DNA sample of Avery without Avery's knowledge. But Fassbender made sure he was back in the doctor's room with Wiegert when the DNA harvests were taking place. Both men kept their mouths quiet when the nurse carried on and began to take additional DNA samples from Avery that were totally unnecessary and outside the scope of their court-obtained search warrant. Incidentally, these were DNA samples that the same nurse would not attempt to take from Bobby, the killer, that same afternoon. Quote, towards the end of the examination, unquote, Fassbender's report reflected, quote, Nurse Faye Fritsch had the lights turned out in the examination room and utilized a Woods light to illuminate any secretions on Stephen's body. Fritsch subsequently took 2 swabs in Stephen's groin area. So gross. After that, she continued and was going to take more swabs when myself and Investigator Wiegert conferred and determined that the search warrant did not call for that type of exam. Investigator Wiegert immediately stopped Fritsch, and the exam was concluded. Investigator Wiegert had Fritsch dispose of the 2 swabs in the biohaz sharp spin. Fritsch also took buccal swabs from Stephen's saliva." Unquote. It's quite curious to look back years later and realize that both Wiegert and Fassbender thought it was crucial they needed to be sitting in the same room as the Manitowoc nurse who collected Avery's DNA, only to mess up and obtain more DNA samples than necessary. But if being present to watch Avery's DNA collection was so essential, why did both Wiegert and Fassbender choose not to accompany Avery down the hall to obtain his fingerprints and palm prints as well? Quote, "Agent Fassbender's report is not credible because Nurse Fritsch never mentions in her charting disposing of the groin swabs," unquote, Zellner said. Fassbender's report, or quote, "Agent Fassbender's report directly contradicts Mr. Avery's account of this examination as described in his affidavit." Contrary to Agent Fassbender's report, Investigator Wiegert told Nurse Fritsch that he would discard the swabs while Agent Fassbender escorted Mr. Avery into a separate room to get his fingerprints. As Mr. Avery followed Agent Fassbender and Nurse Fritsch out of the examination room, Mr. Avery heard Investigator Wiegert tell Nurse Fritsch to give him the groin swabs, and Mr. Avery observed Investigator Wiegert walk to the examination room receptacle as if to discard the groin swabs. Mr. Avery observed that Investigator Wiegert did not drop the groin swabs into the receptacle, unquote. The illegal collection of the groin swabs is yet another reason why Avery's murder conviction warrants being overturned, according to Zellner. Quote, "Investigator Wiegert, as an experienced investigator, would have known that taking groin swabs was not authorized by the search warrant, which permitted only the collection of saliva and blood samples. It is therefore reasonable to conclude from this clear violation of Mr. Avery's Fourth Amendment rights that Investigator Wiegert planned to use the illegally seized groin swabs from Mr. Avery to plant Mr. Avery's DNA on other crime scene evidence," unquote, Zellner stated. Chapter 9. Shady Department. Where there are shuttered factories and boarded up businesses, one of the most desirable jobs in an economically depressed blue-collar area is one that provides a shiny badge, holster, and loaded gun. A fear factor and an intimidating law enforcement presence often keep the locals in check and cast an eye of suspicion on the community's outsiders, notably minorities. In communities like this, a job as a county sheriff deputy means power and prestige. These jobs are hard to come by. Positions in full-time law enforcement carry generous fringe benefits, enormous job security, and generous taxpayer-funded retirement pensions that most of the tax-paying public won't have in their line of work. Work in the public sector, particularly in law enforcement, and you tend to make above average wages. Usually there's a steady flow of overtime pay and built-in annual pay raises that most people in the private sector would envy. Being a sheriff's deputy in a small town means something. It means clout. It makes you somebody. You are given enormous power to mess with somebody's civil rights and freedoms. Want to harass somebody? Want to make somebody's life miserable? Want to intimidate someone? Want to rough someone up? Most cops who operate on the dark side of the law know what they can get away with. Fortunately, Most people in law enforcement are honorable, righteous, and truly want to do the public's good. They are our true public servants, and they try hard to keep our community safe. From them, we owe a debt of gratitude. But not all cops are cut from the same cloth, and that's just as true as in Wisconsin. Around northeastern Wisconsin, the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department gained notoriety on a number of cases involving strong suspicions of a police cover-up. Upon taking office in January 2007, Sheriff Rob Herman promoted his younger brother Todd to the position of Deputy Inspector of Operations, third in command of the entire 60-officer department. In effect, the sheriff put his little brother into one of the best paid positions and most powerful roles in all of county government. During Rob Herman's tenure as sheriff, his undersheriff remained Greg Shetter. Shetter and the Herman brothers all grew up together in southern Manitowoc County. In fact, Shetter happened to be one of the groomsmen in Todd Herman's 1993 wedding, along with the sheriff himself. Wouldn't it be nice to have your wedding party doing your performance reviews, setting your salaries and pay raises, especially in a county government job? As for Shetter, he was sandwiched in the middle of both Herman brothers in the upper administration. He was the boss of one and answered to the other. This was small-town cronyism at its finest, and this was the way the political movers and shakers of Manitowoc County preferred to run their downtown sheriff's office. The Manitowoc Sheriff's Office did not have an internal affairs unit for citizens to bring their complaints about corruption or abuse of power involving the sheriff's deputies. Instead, complaints from the citizenry were funneled to Shetter, and he decided what complaints were legitimate and which ones to dismiss. The opportunity to wear the brown uniform and the shiny star as a Manitowoc County Sheriff's deputy was historically based on who you knew, not what you knew. Deputy candidates who may have been highly qualified but failed to have an inside connection were often part of the reject pile. Their job application materials often collected dust, and they would need to look elsewhere to pursue a career in law enforcement. As far as the top of the administration was concerned, Sheriff Rob Herman and Under Sheriff Greg Shetter were afforded a long-standing generous perk that was off limits to virtually all other county government employees. They got a yearly fuel stipend to the tune of nearly $10,000, each just to drive to and from their office desk jobs in downtown Manitowoc. The generous stipend, approved by the Manitowoc County Board of Supervisors, came in addition to their annual salaries in the neighborhood of $100,000. All for managing a mostly rural sheriff's office, rarely ever handling serious crimes such as rapes, kidnappings, bank robberies, and murders. Most of the serious offenses tended to occur within the jurisdiction of the Manitowoc Police Department, a city police agency that strived to hire more qualified police officers. The city department was regarded as being far more professional, ethical, and accountable to the residents, but it was often dragged down and sullied because it shared the same name as the county sheriff's office. For those who desired to climb the ladder within the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office, there were two easy ways to get there. One was to brown-nose your way to the top. The other was to have dirt on your supervisors. A number of employees who climbed to the top of the troubled department were skilled at both. Back in the 1970s, Bob Herman, president of Cleveland Auto Sales and Salvage Inc., helped elect a mediocre city cop in his 30s named Tom Kasurik as the new sheriff of Manitowoc County. In 1978, Kasurik garnered the most votes in a crowded 5-man political primary that ousted the incumbent sheriff. By all accounts, Bob Herman was an all-around likable fellow. He had recently retired from his position as a Manitowoc County traffic patrolman. On the other hand, Kocurek brought a few redeeming qualities to the sheriff's office. Yet he would hold down the fort for the next 22 years, retiring in 2001, so he could start collecting his government pension as he went to work in Manitowoc's nonprofit sector as a well-paid executive director of the Big Brothers Big Sisters organization. As sheriff, Kocurek's legacy is that his name is synonymous with crookedness and corruption. Along the way, Kocurek made sure to mold a number of disciples within his sheriff's office. After all, he wanted some of the minions to follow in his footsteps and uphold his legacy. Incidentally, just 5 days before Teresa vanished after visiting Avery Road, recently retired Chief Investigator of Manitowoc County, Jean the Sketch Pencil Couche, was compelled to give a sworn deposition at a Manitowoc law office. During that late October afternoon, Couche was asked to recall the circumstances of his demotion by Sheriff Kocurek during the 1980s. Couche had been the undersheriff at one time, second in command of the entire agency, but then, out of nowhere, Kocurek removed him from the post. Quote, I asked him, quote, why did you do this? Unquote, Couche testified, quote, and he said, quote, because I lacked tact, unquote. Couche remembered his 2-decade-old conversation with Kocurek like it happened yesterday. Quote, I said, quote, Tom, tact on your department was the ability to smile at someone's face while you stab them in the back, unquote. I don't think he responded, unquote. Couche smirked. Actually, Couche was no honorable cop himself, and that's why, despite his baggage, he was worth keeping around inside the Kocurek regime. Plus, Couche acquired a special skill that no one else in the sheriff's office had. Couche was a pretty good sketch artist. As people who watched Making a Murderer will remember, Kocurek used Couche as one of his henchmen to accomplish the false imprisonment of Stephen Avery, the bushy-bearded young punk, aged 23. On the hot summer afternoon of July 29, 1985, a prominent young businesswoman was badly beaten and viciously raped, no, she was not raped, as she jogged in her bikini along the sandy shores of Lake Michigan. Sheriff Kocurek put himself in charge of solving the brutal rape, not a rape, although virtually no investigation would be done. Within hours of the attack, Kocurek selected Stephen Avery, a local rascal, as the horrific crime scapegoat. That night, at a local hospital, Couche was furnished a recent jail mugshot of Avery. Couche traced the mugshot on his sketch pad. His drawing was presented to the semi-conscious, rape, not rape, victim as she lay in her hospital bed, recovering from her near-fatal beating. Not near-fatal. Below the clock struck midnight. The sheriff got on the phone with another of his henchmen, Kenneth Peterson, a sergeant in road patrol. Peterson, in turn, got a hold of traffic patrol deputy Mike Bushman. In due time, Peterson and Bushman would both ascend into top-level leadership positions, tokens of gratitude for their unwavering loyalty and ability to follow orders from their sheriff. As for Bushman, he grew up in St. Nazianz, I don't know how to pronounce that, a tiny German village in southern Manitowoc County, surrounded by farms, hillsides, and wilderness. There, his family ran the Bushman hardware store. After high school, Bushman tried college, but he lacked ambition and dropped out. During the 1970s, he found a job as a local school bus driver. But driving a yellow bus wasn't glamorous. A job as a Manitowoc County Sheriff's deputy was way more appealing. Although Bushman had no prior law enforcement experience or special qualifications that suited him to become a cop, that would not be a problem. When Bushman filed out the job application, the form asked for references. The first reference Bushman put on his application was Bob Herman, the popular Manitowoc County Traffic Patrol deputy who ran the Cleveland Auto Salvage Yard about 15 miles from St. Nazianz. The name of Bob Herman meant something in a county where law enforcement jobs were based on who you knew. Sure enough, Bushman got the job. Now he too was a full-time county road patrol deputy like Bob Herman. Of course, Bushman owed a tremendous debt of gratitude to the Herman family, and that would not be forgotten. As for Ken Peterson, he wasn't the type of guy you'd expect any reputable law enforcement agency would to be begging to take a job either. Growing up in Manitowoc, Peterson had no ambitions to pursue a career in law enforcement. He graduated from Lincoln High School in 1968. From there, he attended Lakeshore Technical College in nearby Cleveland, Wisconsin, earning an associate's degree in marketing. But over the next 6 years, Peterson bounced from job to job. He struggled to find stable employment. Among his many low-paying jobs during the 1970s that did not pan out, Peterson worked at the Montgomery Ward retail store in Manitowoc. But in 1975, Peterson had a stroke of good fortune. He got hired by the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office. For Peterson, 1978 was a transformative year that paved the way for his future success. That was the year Tom Kosarik was elected sheriff. 3 years later, in 1981, Peterson was involved in a big slip-up that made the daily newspaper. His actions involved a questionable death, possibly a preventable death. Peterson was involved in a traffic crash that left dead a 22-year-old woman from Manitowoc County's small community of Newton. The case may have ruined his law enforcement career had he worked for someone other than Kosarik. A number of sheriff's deputies who worked at the agency have said that Peterson was driving his squad car excessively over the speed limit in a reckless manner. At the time, he ran over the young lady during a thick, late-night fog. The fatality was chronicled in Manitowoc's newspaper on July 21, 1981. Quote, County Coroner Marion Cumming today identified the woman killed in a crash of two motorcycles early Monday as Gina M. Herzog, 22, Route 1, Newton. Cumming said the cause of death was a head injury sustained in the crash of the motorcycles. A squad car later collided with the wreckage and the victim. Unquote. Shortly after midnight, two young men on motorcycles left a bar out in the country as Peterson was gunning the gas on his squad car, racing to the bar to investigate allegations of underage drinking. The motorcycles got tangled in the thick, dense fog, causing the riders to tumble to the ground. Minutes later, Peterson's squad came barreling down the two-lane highway. Fellow members of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department have said that Peterson was racing toward the bar like a madman when he struck and ran over Herzog, who may have been sitting on the side of the roadway, shaken up from the initial motorcycle tumble, according to other sheriff's deputies who worked for the county at the time of the tragedy. Nobody else was seriously hurt during the motorcycle spill. 2 days later, a number of top public officials for Manitowoc County orchestrated a press conference. Deputy Peterson was absolved of any wrongdoing and negligence regarding the tragic loss of life. According to the newspaper account, a coroner's inquest into Herzog's death was not even necessary. The Manitowoc press was assured the matter was cleared up, even though it was unclear whether interview statements were even taken from the other motorcycle riders involved in the bike spill. There was also no mention in the newspaper article regarding how fast Peterson was traveling. It was unclear whether any crash reconstruction occurred. The story in the paper was headlined, quote, Coroner says police car no factor in tragic death, unquote. Quote, the The pathologist, Dr. John H. Fodden, said severe skull bone and brain damage caused the almost immediate death of Herzog, and this was due to the motorcycle crash. Herzog was also injured internally after death, and that could have been caused by a wheel of one of the motorcycles or an automobile, but it is very, very clear this was after she was dead, unquote. Dr. Fodden told the newspaper. But was Herzog alive when Peterson's squad car ran her over? Since Peterson was barreling down the 2-lane highway under the thick fog and darkness, he did not know. Was the young woman's death avoidable? There's not even a paper trail surrounding the crash in Peterson's personal file. My review in 2016 of Peterson's Manitowoc County employment file showed there was no mention at all of the fatality. There was no mention whether 22-year-old Gina Herzog's fatality went before the Sheriff's Office Accident Review Board, even though it was standard practice to do so whenever one of the Manitowoc County squad cars sustained damage. At any rate, both Peterson and the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office escaped liability. Perhaps most telling, there were no more follow-up newspaper articles regarding Herzog's death after July 23, 1981. The local newspaper agreed to bury the story, and nothing more was ever written. I get so tired when I read. Written about the infamous Kenny Peterson incident. One sheriff's official told the author that Herzog's father was heartbroken and devastated by his daughter's untimely tragedy, but decided not to pursue a lawsuit against the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department because nothing could change the outcome. A civil lawsuit against the county and Kenny Peterson would not bring the grieving man's daughter back. As a result, the Kenny Peterson incident became a successful whitewash for Sheriff Kosarik. He was skilled at manipulating the local press to do what he wanted, and part of that skill also involved making sure that some stories that may have reflected poorly upon him and the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office never saw the light of day. As for the victim, Gina Herzog's newspaper obituary noted she was born in Manitowoc, a class of 1977 graduate of Kiel High School, and she worked in Sheboygan for the state of Wisconsin's Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Office. She was survived by her parents of rural Newton, a sister, 2 brothers, and 1 grandmother. The Herzogs had to persevere after the pain and heartache of their profound loss that many people blamed on Kenny Peterson's reckless driving. As for Peterson, the law enforcement career, his law enforcement career hardly hit the skids because of the episode. In fact, his county sheriff's career would undergo a dramatic rise. 3 major promotions within the next 8 years. In 1982, Kosarik promoted Peterson to Road Patrol Sergeant. In turn, Peterson became an obedient foot soldier. That was never more so than on July 29, 1985, hours after Penny Bernstein's brutal attack on the Lake Michigan beach. Quote, "That evening, I would have received a phone call from Sheriff Kosarik informing me to arrest Stephen Avery to see if he was at home and arrest him for the attempted first-degree homicide." Unquote. Peterson testified, quote, "That night, the only person I had any contact with was the sheriff. There was no one else that I was aware of." Unquote. The previous winter, Avery had forced Sandra Morris, the wife of Sheriff's Deputy Bill Morris, off the road in front of Avery's trailer. Avery pointed an unloaded shotgun at her, accusing her of spreading false rumors that Avery had been outside naked on one of his cars, laying down and masturbating on the hood of his car. The Sandy Morris incident was fresh on the minds of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office in the summer of 1985, and that made Avery a prime scapegoat for Sheriff Kosarik. He would look good to the community if he could take a heap of credit for single-handedly solving the rape, it's not a rape, of a prominent businesswoman in lightning quick fashion. So that night, July 29, 1985, one of the deputies Peterson asked to tag along to carry out the sheriff's wishes of arresting Stephen Avery was Road Deputy Mike Bushman. Thanks to Kosuriak, Bushman was now serving as Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office first ever dog handler. Under Peterson's watch, Avery's arrest for a brutal crime he was being framed of went down without a hitch. At his December 1985 jury trial, Avery provided more than a dozen witnesses who insisted he was doing concrete work at his family's salvage yard on the afternoon in question. Avery's public defenders produced store receipts from the Shopko retail store in Green Bay, indicating Avery and his wife were inside the store at 5:13 p.m., a mere 75 minutes after the time of the vicious rape, not a rape, north of Two Rivers. The jury of Manitowoc County residents rejected Avery's pleas of innocence. The jury was in line with District Attorney Dennis Vogel and Sheriff Kosuriak. Avery was convicted of attempted first-degree murder, first-degree sexual assault, and false imprisonment. On March 10, 1986, Judge Fred Hazelwood sentenced Avery to spend 32 years inside a Wisconsin state prison facility. In August 1987, a Wisconsin appeals court rejected Avery's attempt to overturn his conviction, even though it appeared Avery was truly innocent of the awful crime. In the back of his twisted mind, Sheriff Kosuriak knew he had pulled a fast one. He had hoodwinked the entire Manitowoc community, a jury, and even the rape victim, not a rape. He had tricked them all into believing Avery was the villainous monster who didn't rape, the woman who ran the popular candy store in Manitowoc. Now that Kosuriak's career was going places, he needed other foot soldiers he could trust as part of his army. On December 21, 1987, he typed a 2-paragraph memo for Peterson's personnel file. The subject was titled, Promotion. Quote, during the past 12 months at the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, you have been in training for one of the most important positions at the department. Because of the excellent job which you have been doing, effective January 15, 1988, you will officially assume the duties of Deputy Inspector of the Operations Division. Congratulations on your new appointment, and I look forward to working with you in your command position for many years to come. Unquote. On December 18, 1989, Peterson drew another huge promotion from the boss. Quote, as inspector at the Sheriff's Department, you will represent the sheriff in his absence and supervise the day-to-day operations of the entire Sheriff's Department. Your past work product in the various positions held by yourself at the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department has always been excellent, and I feel confident that this pattern of productivity will continue in your new positions as inspector. I look forward to working with you and having you as my right-hand man here in Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. Unquote. Sheriff Kosuriak. Peterson's promotion to Sheriff's Inspector came with a 9% salary increase and another exclusive perk given only to the top 2 sheriff officials. Quote, as inspector, he is now eligible for $100 per month car allowance plus $1,000 gallons of gas per year, unquote, Kosuriak notified county personnel. As for Bushman, documents contained within his employment personnel file from Manitowoc County government show he had wrecked one of Manitowoc County's new Chevrolet Caprice squad cars on September 4, 1989. Bids to repair the damage range between $2,004 and $3,792, a lot of money by 1989 standards. Quote, Sergeant Bushman, while on patrol, observed what appeared to be a drunk driver. While watching this vehicle in his rear view mirror, Sergeant Bushman lost his bearings in relationship to the intersection. Sergeant Bushman was unable to stop the squad car before it ran off the road through the T intersection. The squad car, at just less than highway speed, struck the embankment and came to a rest. Investigation into the accident showed the case to be a result of inattentive driving. Accident investigated and written by the Wisconsin State Patrol. Bushman's incident was presented to the Sheriff's Office Accident Review Board. One of the reviewers happened to be Peterson, who ran over Gina Gerzog 8 years earlier. Quote, "We recommend Sergeant Bushman be issued a written reprimand relating to this accident," unquote, Peterson advised Sheriff Kasurik. As Peterson knew from prior experience, a royal screw-up as a Manitowoc Sheriff's deputy was not necessarily a professional setback under Kasurik's leadership. Just a few months later, on February 9, 1990, Bushman received a memo in his personnel file from the sheriff. Quote, "I wish to congratulate you and advise you that you have been selected to fill the position of Lieutenant Shift Commander. Your excellent service to Manitowoc and the Sheriff's Department in your past positions of Patrol Officer and Patrol Sergeant have prepared you to assume the responsibilities of Lieutenant, and I am sure you will do an excellent job as you have in the past." Unquote. In Bushman, Kasurik knew he had added another sheep to his flock. Because the 1985 Avery prosecution was a sham from the get-go, the Manitowoc sheriff was growing increasingly paranoid. He was willing to target anybody who posed a threat at blowing his cover. In 1990, as sheriff was serving his unjust attempted murder prison sentence, Kasurik got wind of someone in town who was not convinced of Avery's guilt. Freedom of speech may be afforded by the U.S. Constitution, but the following information, obtained by a Manitowoc County Sheriff's Police report, reveals the dangers of speaking out in a small town where law enforcement runs roughshod over the citizenry. One man in Manitowoc was threatened with arrest and felony charges if he made his beliefs known again about Avery's innocence. In March 1990, Kasurik, the sheriff himself, wrote up a formal report classifying the incident as harassment. According to the sheriff, a customer of the Bernstein's confectionery candy store stopped inside and asked if co-owner Penny Bernstein was there. She and her husband were out of town at the time. The customer, Eric Moen, 33, told the store clerk he was a friend of Avery and that Avery was innocent of assaulting the candy store lady. A week later, the sheriff of Manitowoc County made a personal visit to Moen's residence on South 38th Street in Manitowoc. Quote, "Eric stated that he was in fact at Bernstein's confectionery several days ago and had stopped in to purchase some chocolates. He stated that he meant no harm and only wanted to tell Penny Bernstein that, in his opinion, Steve Avery was innocent," unquote, Kasurik's report reflected. I get so tired when I read. The sheriff who had framed Avery also knew about Gregory Allen, the dangerous sexual predator who was allowed to get away with the near-fatal assault and remain a danger to the community at large. Yet this is how Kasurik summarized his exchange with Moen. Quote, "Eric admitted that he had no factual data that was not already brought out during the trial and that the belief of Stephen Avery being innocent was only a personal belief on his part. I advised Eric that his presence at the store in attempting to contact Penny Bernstein reference this case could be interpreted as a felony charge reference harassing a witness. Eric was warned that any future attempts to contact the Bernstein family and discuss this matter would result in felony charges being brought against him. He was also informed that if he had any new information that was not allegedly brought out at the trial, that he should contact the sheriff deputies, which was at the investigating agency, and he would be glad to look into the information. Eric stated that he understood, Kocourek wrote. Unquote. Obviously, Kocourek's report was a web of lies. He was not about to reopen the rape investigation, and he most certainly was not about to investigate somebody else as the rapist. Not a rape. Rather, the sheriff's face-to-face interview with the local man served a higher purpose. Kocourek had iced the concept of Avery's innocence from gaining traction around Manitowoc. For him, this was an important event, much more so than punishing real criminals. In the days following the brutal attack along Lake Michigan's beach, the traumatized rape victim began receiving anonymous threatening phone calls at her house from the rapist, Gregory Allen, who was notorious for calling his victims afterwards. But Sheriff Kocourek convinced the candy store owner not to worry. She was just confused. Avery was already in jail, he informed her. Rather than trust her own instincts, she believed the sheriff. Because the residents of Manitowoc County were in no position to rise up and oust Kocourek from office, he remained the most powerful politician of Manitowoc County for many more years to come. Finally, when the numbers lined up for him to collect his police pension, he decided to leave the office on his own terms. In 2000, he decided to pass the torch of corruption to someone else. But his heir apparent, Ken Peterson, still didn't know where all the bodies were buried and all the skeletons were being hidden. The Manitowoc County Master needed to let his understudy in on one more devious secret. Once again, all things centered on the high-profile rape, not a rape, conviction of Avery. From the 1980s. At the time, Avery was pushing 40 and in the middle of his prison term behind the walls at the Wisconsin Department of Corrections. As for the retiring sheriff, Kocourek was cutting cakes, receiving going-away gifts, and bidding his farewells to fellow county government employees and local dignitaries as part of his grand farewell retirement send-off. And now that Peterson had earned the outgoing sheriff's sacred trust, the time arrived to make Peterson aware of a secret document being kept inside a special safe, a safe to which only the sheriff of Manitowoc County had access. Although the sheriff's office had a large vault where it housed thousands of old records from major criminal cases over the years, this particular report was apparently off limits to the rest of the sheriff's employees. The secret document turned out to be a letter, purportedly written by a prison inmate, outlining an alleged confession that convicted prisoner Avery gave to the inmate regarding the 1985 rape of Penny Bernston. The letter was mentioned as part of Avery's $36 million civil rights lawsuit. It was more unflattering testimony about Kocourek, and the topic of the letter's existence came up just a couple of weeks before Teresa vanished and was killed. Quote, "He said some inmate from Brown County sent it to him," unquote, Peterson testified. Quote, "That's all I know. I don't know if it came direct or where it came from. All I know is it was there," unquote. Regardless of how it was contrived, the letter in the sheriff's safe was phony. In reality, Avery never confessed to raping Penny Bernston. He maintained his steadfast innocence since his arrest by Kenneth Peterson on July 29, 1985. On September 11, 2003, the gates of the Wisconsin Department of Corrections swung wide open as a large contingent of well-wishers shared hugs, kisses, and tears with Avery. Attorney Keith Finley of the Wisconsin Innocence Project had secured a DNA exoneration proving Gregory Allen was the real beachfront rapist, just as the more reputable City of Manitowoc Police Department suspected all along. 2 years later, during October 2005, Avery's tenacious civil lawyers from Milwaukee, Walt Kelly and Stephen Glynn, were pounding away at the tainted Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office. The agency's upper administration was uneasy and uncomfortable. The scrappy civil attorneys were making substantial progress as they assembled their case against Manitowoc County and Sheriff Kocurek, the suspected crook and mastermind of Avery's 1985 frame job. That month, the following employees got pulled off the job and were paraded into Manitowoc Law Office, where they were forced to raise their right hand and be subjected to an uncomfortable videotaped civil rights lawsuit deposition. Sheriff Ken Peterson, Lieutenant Detective James Link, Road Patrol Sergeant Andrew Colborn, former Sheriff's Deputy Judy Dvorak, and retired Chief Investigator Jean Couchet. Dvorak would reveal how she despised Avery, who had no history of any sexual violence, but did have a solid alibi to account for his whereabouts during the time of Gregory Allen's rape. No rape. At most of these lawsuit depositions sat a short, stubby man who was not dressed in a suit and tie like the room full of lawyers and key members of the sheriff's office, such as Peterson and Link. Avery's unsightly presence at the same table as the members of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office had to be sickening to them. The clock was ticking closer and closer to the scheduled deposition of the master himself, retired Sheriff Tom Kocurek. What would he have to say for himself when he found himself seated at the same wooden table, sitting in the very same room as the unfortunate man from whom he had stolen 18 years of his life? Chapter 10. RAV4. One of the most shadowy figures to emerge from the Teresa Halbach murder probe was veteran Manitowoc County classic car buff Andy Colborn. Colborn belonged to various classic car clubs around northeastern Wisconsin, and he was fond of the 1950s era Plymouths. Over the years, Colborn had walked the grounds of Avery Salvage on many occasions to find the right spare parts for his prized collection of old cars. And like so many of the rising stars in the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office, Colborn landed in law enforcement as a last resort. After high school, he enlisted in the Air Force on active duty, serving our country from 1976 until 1988. He was stationed in Nevada for much of his time. In his late 20s, he left the Air Force and found work in Las Vegas as an auto transmission mechanic. After 3 years as a grease monkey, Colborn left Nevada and returned to Wisconsin. That year, 1990, he found employment at the Wapaka Foundry, where he stayed until 1992. But in his early 30s, he set his sights on a new line of work. Manitowoc Sheriff Tom Kocurek offered Colborn a full-time job as a county jailer. Colborn later gained infamy for his role in Avery's wrongful conviction case. Colborn was the dopey Manitowoc County jailer who spoke with one of the Green Bay area police departments around 1995 regarding the recent arrest of serial rapist Gregory Allen. Colborn was alerted that the police in Brown County had a rapist in custody who had confessed that someone else was imprisoned for a violent assault committed in nearby Manitowoc County. Many people believe Colborn confided in Sheriff Kocurek about this matter. In the end, Manitowoc County ignored the call, preferring to let Avery rot in prison another 8 years for a crime he did not commit. From the moment that Colborn disregarded the call that could have gained Avery's freedom many years sooner, Colborn's career path was on the rise under Kocurek and Peterson. Colborn was moved out of his less desirable job as a jailer and assigned to road patrol. He later was promoted to a shift sergeant. By the fall of 2005, Colborn had delusions of becoming the next sheriff of Manitowoc. Kenny Peterson was nearing retirement, and the crooked agency's coveted top spot was opening up. However, The month of October 2005 was becoming more and more stressful, all thanks to his sheriff's office arch nemesis. Colborn was being dragged into the civil rights lawsuit of Avery, who was finally freed in September 2003. 3 weeks before Teresa vanished, Colborn was in uniform when he showed up at the Manitowoc Law Office to answer a barrage of questions from Avery's civil attorneys of Milwaukee. Colborn, quote, I gathered yet that they had someone in custody. I don't know if this person had commented directly to the person who contacted me or had commented to other people within that jurisdiction as this eventually got to my caller, unquote. Lawyer, quote, but the detective had indicated that there was a person in custody who had made a statement about a Manitowoc County offense, correct? Unquote. Quote, yes, unquote. Lawyer, quote, and what that person in custody had said was that he had committed an assault in Manitowoc County and someone else was in jail for it, correct? Unquote. Quote, yes, sir, unquote. Lawyer, quote, and that much you're pretty sure of? Unquote. Quote, yes, unquote. Lawyer, quote, I mean, that's a significant event, unquote. Lawyer, quote, right? That's what stood out in my mind, unquote. After the newspaper coverage of Avery's exoneration in September 2003, Colborn had realized he was in a hot mess. He needed to confide in someone he trusted about his role in the Gregory Allen episode. Quote, you brought that up to someone else, correct? Unquote, Kelly asked. Quote, yes, sir, unquote. Quote, and to whom did you bring that up? Unquote. Quote, to Lieutenant Lenk, unquote. Quote, there was also a conversation that followed that. You spoke to Sheriff Peterson, correct? Unquote. Correct. Quote, yes, sir. I remember coming into work and Sheriff Peterson was downstairs where our patrol division is, and I got the impression he was waiting for me to come into work. He initiated the conversation by saying he had spoken with Lieutenant Link, and he felt that it would be in the best interest of Lieutenant Link and myself and the Sheriff's Department, I would suppose, that if I was to give him a statement on the gist of our conversation or what we had discussed. And I asked for clarification on that, unquote. Colborn laughed nervously during his deposition. Quote, and he goes, quote, well, what you discussed about a telephone call that you received when you were working in the jail, unquote. And I said, quote, okay, unquote. And before I went out on patrol, I provided this statement, unquote. In the coming days, Colborn realized his lawsuit deposition experience had negative overtones and perhaps lasting consequences that weren't good for him. Would Avery's lawyers amend their civil rights case to add Deputy Colborn as one of their co-defendants? Colborn also had to figure that those who ran the sheriff's office were not going down on a sinking ship. He was emerging as a logical fall guy, a prime scapegoat for Sheriff Peterson and the department's other co-defendants, Kasurik and former District Attorney Dennis Vogel. The continuation and the publicity of Avery's civil rights lawsuit was bad news for Colborn's upcoming sheriff's candidacy. Colborn had been collaborating with Lieutenant Link about his eventual bid for sheriff. A Colborn victory put Link in line for a hefty raise and promotion to undersheriff of Manitowoc County. However, the big election was still a year away, but campaign season was just around the corner. But in 2005, there were far more pressing matters. The sheriff's office needed to deal with Avery. Quote, if I wanted to eliminate Steve, it would have been a whole lot easier to eliminate Steve than it would be to frame Steve, unquote. Sheriff Peterson told Green Bay television station Fox 11 in the days after Avery's arrest. The Manitowoc sheriff went on to say, quote, if we wanted him out of the picture, like in prison, or if we wanted him killed, It would be much easier just to kill him. Unquote. One of the most dramatic moments from Avery's murder trial came when Colborn, then 48, was on the witness stand during Avery's trial, and defense attorney Dean Strang had a chance to cross-examine him. Quote, one of the things that road patrol officers frequently do is call into dispatch and give the dispatcher the license plate number of a car they've stopped or a car that looks out of place for some reason. Unquote. Correct. Quote, correct. Yes, sir. Quote, unquote. Colborn answered. Quote, and the dispatcher can get information about to whom the license plate is registered? Unquote. Quote, yes, sir. Unquote. Quote, and if a car is abandoned and there's nobody in the car, registration tells you who the owner presumably is? Unquote. Quote, yes, sir. Unquote. Quote, I'm going to ask you to listen, if you would, to a short phone call. Unquote. Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, this is Lynn. Lynn, hi, Andy. Can you run Sam William Henry 582? See if it comes back to, and then it says inaudible. Okay, shows that she's a missing person, and at least lists to Teresa Halbach. All set. Okay, is that what you're looking for, Andy? 99 Toyota? Yep. Okay, thank you. You're so welcome. Bye-bye. When the call ended, Strang resumed his line of uncomfortable questions for Andy Colborn. Quote, and then you tell the dispatcher, oh, 99 Toyota, unquote. Quote, no, I thought she told me that, unquote. Strang replayed the audio for the jury and Sergeant Colborn to hear again. Okay, shows that she's a missing person, and it lists to Teresa Halbach. All set? Okay, is that what you're looking for, Andy? 99 Toyota? Yup. Okay, thank you. You're so welcome. Bye-bye. Colborn ducked his head toward the courtroom microphone. He avoided eye contact with Strang. Quote, were you looking at these plates when you called them in? Strang asked, unquote. Quote, no, sir, unquote. Then he lifted his head, grimaced, and cracked his knuckles 2 times. Quote, do you have any recollection of making that phone call? Unquote. Colborn buried his head. He paused a few seconds before answering that he guessed he made the call on November 3, 2005. Quote, probably after I received a phone call from Investigator Wiegert letting me know that there was a missing person. Unquote. November 3 was when Calumet and Manitowoc County first learned of Teresa's disappearance. Strang followed up with another excellent question. Quote, Investigator Wiegert, did he tell you the license plate number for Teresa Halbach when he called you? Unquote. Colborn would not look up and answer Strang's question. He was in his comfort zone, keeping his head down and looking straight down toward his microphone. Quote, I just don't remember the exact content of our conversation, but he had to have given it to me because I wouldn't have had the number any other way, unquote, Colborn testified as he let out another nervous laugh. Quote, well, unquote, Strang began, you can understand how someone listening to that might think you were calling in a license plate that you were looking at on the back of a 99 Toyota, unquote. Quote, yes, unquote. Colborn looked up and shrugged his shoulders. Quote, but there's no way you should have been looking at Teresa Halbach's license plate on November 3 on the back end of a 99 Toyota, unquote. Quote, I shouldn't have been, and I was not looking at the license plate, unquote. Quote, because you're aware now that the first time that Toyota was reported found was on November 5, unquote. Quote, yes, sir. And they show a picture of the dam, that turnabout. After the Making a Murderer hysteria, many fans presumed Colborn made his cryptic call after snooping around late at night on his way home from work on November 3, the first night of the missing persons investigation. That evening, Colborn spoke with Avery in person at Avery Salvage between 6:30 and 7 p.m. to get a statement from Avery about the missing woman's whereabouts. And later that night, Colborn met with Link, Manitowoc County Detective Dennis Jacobs, County Detective Dave Remaker, and Calumet County Investigator Dietering. The 5 men focused on Avery and another Manitowoc County residence Teresa visited on the last day of her life, the property on County Road B belonging to George Zipperer. Colborn joined Dietering and Remaker at that house around 9:40 p.m. They made entry at 9:53 p.m. Quote, I did review voicemail messages left on the answering machine and caller ID. I did locate a caller ID entry on October 31, 2005 at 2:12 p.m. from phone number blah blah blah. I recognize this as being the cellular phone number of Teresa Halbach, unquote. By all accounts, the Manitowoc County Sheriff's entourage called it a night around 10:30 p.m. No additional work was done to locate Teresa or her missing SUV during the overnight shift. It's been established that Colborn drove home from Sheriff's headquarters in downtown Manitowoc using his personal vehicle. He testified he fell asleep on his living room couch at his home near Whitelaw. His work schedule had him off the next day, Friday, November 4. But there were other factors at play. Given Teresa's alarming disappearance and the zeal to pin the crime on Avery, Colborn had a lot on his mind. But if Colborn chose to cross the line from good cop to bad, he had to reconcile these inner demons with his own conscience. After all, Colborn was a God-fearing man who was deeply involved in his Christian church. On one hand, a young woman from a good farm family was suddenly missing. Her worried family deserved the best effort from him and other police. On the other hand, Colborn considered Avery a filthy, no-good swine, a glory hound who was leveraging the Wisconsin media to undermine the reputation of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office with his constant press coverage regarding his wrongful conviction lawsuit. The lawsuit gnawed at Manitowoc County because it kept giving everyone a black eye. And get this, Avery was now on the verge of becoming one of the biggest millionaires in Manitowoc County. Would he use his exoneration lawsuit money to buy up the city's downtown businesses, own the local pool halls, and maybe a tavern or a striptease club? The idea of Avery being rich, filthy rich, was downright repulsive to the community's leaders. And if Manitowoc County's lawyers reached a large settlement as payment to Avery as reparation for all of his injustices, Colborn was a logical fall guy for the screw-up. The footsteps were getting louder and louder. Then, all of a sudden, there came along a golden opportunity for Colborn and others to restore their careers and destroy Avery's life once and for all. Quote, just 3 weeks before Teresa Halbach's disappearance, both Link and Colborn were deposed in Avery's civil lawsuit about their own involvement in the failure to follow up an exculpatory lead, which contributed to Stephen Avery spending another 8 years in prison before his eventual exoneration. Curiously, although Link and Colborn were aware that authority for the investigation of the Halbach disappearance was transferred to the Calumet County Sheriff's Department because of the conflict of interest arising from Avery's lawsuit, both officers volunteered to search Avery's personal residence and did not inform the Calumet County authorities that they had direct contact with the civil case or that they had themselves been deposed and had their conduct as to Avery called into question in the case a mere 3 weeks earlier, unquote. Colborn's cryptic phone call to dispatch remained one of the biggest mysteries associated with Teresa's killing. but new evidence Zellner uncovered in 2018 strongly suggests Sergeant Colborn, who by all accounts was conscientious about his job, was ambitiously working off the clock, so to speak, on Friday, November 4, because he did not want to let his comrades down. Former Mishicot resident Kevin Romlo positively identified Colborn as the sheriff's deputy whom he alerted to the abandoned RAV4 being parked near the State Highway 147 turnabout. Quote, "In the series, I recognized the officer who I talked to at the Senex station on November 4, 2005, unquote, Romlo testified with confidence. Quote, "Having watched Making a Murderer, I now know that his name is Andrew Colborn," unquote. Zellner's filings from October 2017 reveal, quote, "The eyewitness was also sure he shared his observation with the Manitowoc County deputy. But in that instant, Sergeant Colborn never made a report of this conversation," unquote. During an August 2018 interview for this book, Zellner told the author, quote, "I went to the old dam with Mr. Romlo and my investigator. He is absolutely telling the truth about seeing the Halbach vehicle. He is also telling the truth about the Senex station missing poster in the window regarding Ms. Halbach and her vehicle," unquote. When Colborn made his highly suspicious call into Manitowoc County Radio Dispatch, my back hurts so bad, he was not utilizing his squad car's CB radio. Quote, "Sergeant Colborn placed this call from his personal cell phone, not his squad car's radio," unquote, Zellner said. Quote, "Sergeant Colborn testified that, after completing contact with the Zipperers, he signed off at Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, which would have included leaving his cruiser in the secure police lot, and drove his personal vehicle home." If Sergeant Colborn was on duty and in his squad car, it would be reasonable to expect transmissions to and from Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department dispatch to come over the radio. Because Sergeant Colborn called dispatch from his personal phone, it is reasonable to conclude that he made the call on Friday, November 4, 2005, his day off, unquote. Kevin Romlo now believes he encountered Colborn at the gas station around 12:30 p.m. to let him know about the missing woman's vehicle. Quote, "Sergeant Colborn confirmed the identity of Ms. Halbach's vehicle by calling dispatch on his cell phone around 7:30 p.m. on November 4. Realizing such a call would be recorded, Sergeant Colborn removed the license plates from Ms. Halbach's vehicle to conceal that he had actually located the vehicle at the point in time when he made the call about the license plates," unquote. In the background of Colborn's call to Lynn, the Manitowoc County dispatcher, someone else's voice can be heard. Quote, "Audible in a recording of Sergeant Colborn's call to Manitowoc Dispatch regarding the victim's license plate number, a third party states, 'It's hers,' unquote." Zellner also realized Colborn's license plate call was tendered to Avery's original trial lawyers, Buting and Strang, on a CD containing a total of 30 tracks of other dispatch calls in relation to the investigation. Quote, "It is apparent that the recordings are organized chronologically on the CD. Sergeant Colborn's dispatch call was titled Track 3. The preceding Track 2 is a call to Manitowoc Dispatch from an unnamed officer regarding George Zipperer. The officer requested a criminal records check of George Zipperer from the dispatcher. It is reasonable to conclude that this call was placed by one of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office deputies, who were the Calumet County Sheriff's Office Detective Dietering, before they proceeded to the Zipperers on November 3, 2005. Therefore, it follows that Sergeant Colborn's call to dispatch occurred after he responded to the Avery property to make contact with Mr. Avery, and after he drove, sorry, just saw I got a message, back to the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office about his contact with Mr. Avery. Quote, Sergeant Colborn's explanation that he called Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office dispatch to confirm information obtained from Calumet County Sheriff's Office investigator Wiegert is contradicted by the chronological order of the dispatch calls as produced to trial defense counsel. Sergeant Colborn testified that he placed this call to dispatch after speaking with investigator Wiegert while he was driving from the Avery property to Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office after making contact with Mr. Avery. However, based upon the chronological organization of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office dispatch calls as produced to trial defense counsel, Sergeant Colborn called dispatch after meeting the assembled officers at Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office long after leaving the Avery property and speaking with investigator Wiegert, unquote, Zellner stated. Given the uncontroverted facts dug up by Zellner, Colborn's murder trial testimony now appears seriously flawed. Quote, after departing the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office for the Zippers property, Sergeant Colborn had no viable reason to call Manitowoc County. Why does this keep going off? Sorry. Okay, quote, after departing the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office for the Zippers property, Sergeant Colborn had no viable reason to call Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office dispatch regarding Ms. Halbach's vehicle, unquote, Zellner argues. Quote, from the time Sergeant Colborn arrived at the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office to the time he checked out and returned home, Sergeant Colborn was with at least Detective Remacher and Investigator Diedering, both of whom could have confirmed information regarding Ms. Halbach's vehicle, unquote. A month before Avery's huge trial got underway, Strang and Buting informed Manitowoc County Judge Patrick Willis of their client's frame-up defense in the murder trial. The lawyers for Avery planned to build their defense on the premise that Lincoln Colborn had falsified several pieces of evidence, namely blood, to secure Avery's arrest and conviction for Teresa's murder. But Strang and Buting tried to stretch their theory like a rubber band, and it never panned out as they envisioned. They accused Lincoln Colborn of having planted an old vial of Avery's blood, a vial kept inside a cardboard box of files from Avery's wrongful conviction rape case at the Manitowoc County Courthouse, which was next door to the sheriff's building. With the trial looming, the prosecution team realized it needed to defuse the argument. In the days before Avery's February 2007 murder trial began, Calumet County investigator Gary Steyer was tapped to speak with Lank and Colborn regarding their whereabouts during the week leading up to the discovery of Teresa's RAV4 by Pam of God Sturm. I put the God of God in there, not Farrick. Steyer's interviews of Lincoln Colborn were non-accusatory and consisted of softball questions that did not include any follow-ups. This is understandable because Steyer knew that his own head would be dished up like the head of John the Baptist if Wiegert and others discovered he was attempting to grill the two Manitowoc County Sheriff's deputies and finding flaws with their interview statements. Lincoln Colborn were questioned separately about their schedules for Sunday, October 30, 2005, through Saturday, November 5. Quote, Sergeant Colborn indicates he can recall where he was because his routine is fairly rigid. On Sunday, Sergeant Colborn indicates at 10:30 a.m. he would have left his house and went to his mother-in-law's house to check on her. Sergeant Colborn indicates every Sunday prior to the start of his shift, he goes over to his mother-in-law's to make sure she is okay. Sergeant Colborn says he would leave her house about 11:45 a.m. to go to work, unquote. Monday was Halloween, the date when Halbach met her end. Quote, I should say allegedly, quote, Sergeant Colborn indicated he had worked a 9.5 hour workday and was done around 11:18 p.m., unquote. Colborn, quote, would generally go home after his shift is over and watch TV, fall asleep on the couch, and then go to bed, unquote. For Tuesday, November 1, and Wednesday, November 2, Colborn remembered he worked regular 8-hour shifts, finishing at 8 p.m. Quote, Colborn indicated generally he would have returned home or he would have watched TV and then gone to bed, unquote. Thursday, November 3, was the start of the missing person investigation for Teresa. Colborn was the first officer to interview Avery, a face-to-face interview in which Colborn did not see any noticeable gashes or wounds to Avery's hands. Quote, Sergeant Colborn indicated he had started at 11:45 a.m., where he had worked his 8-hour shift plus 3 hours of overtime assisting Calumet County investigator John Dietering in speaking to the Zipperers about Teresa Halbach. Sergeant Colborn also remembers he was called to go check the Avery residence. Sergeant Colborn indicated he had concluded his shift around 10:50 p.m., unquote. Next, it was time to ask Colborn about his whereabouts and movements for the next day, Friday, November 4. This time, Colborn claimed he had a foggy memory. He portrayed himself as having what's known in police circles as cop amnesia. Quote, on Friday, November 4, 2005, Sergeant Colborn indicated he was off. He could not recall what he had done on his off day, unquote. Colborn was just one day removed from the biggest day of police work in his career, and he was allowed to answer with a straight face that he simply could not remember anything about his activities and whereabouts the following day on an open missing persons case where the victim had not been found. Her car was still gone, and the attacker remained at large. It's also a little-known fact that Colborn was intricately involved in 2 other very strange discoveries of physical evidence surrounding Teresa's murder. Not far from the location where the eyewitnesses saw Teresa's RAV4 being hidden off Highway 147 at the turnabout, civilian searches also found a silver cellular phone in the ditch. And it wasn't an ordinary phone either. The phone is commonly known as a burner phone. Burner phones are often used by 2 groups: people on a limited budget who use them to avoid the expensive entanglements with mobile companies, and the other element of people who use burner phones are criminals. There's a degree of privacy that make it nearly impossible for police to hunt down the caller's activities. A burner phone would be ideal for a drug dealer, a phone harasser, and for a stalker. On Wednesday, November 9, 10 days after Teresa vanished, a search party of Manitowoc County residents notified the police that they had made a suspicious discovery at 2:50 p.m. The find occurred along Stage Highway 147, just east of Ridge Road. 3 police officers were called to the spot: Colborn, Lenk, and Calumet County Deputy Craig Wendling. Quote, in the north ditch, right along the gravel line, was an AudioVox phone, silver in color. That item was found by a person searching, his name being John Campion. After collecting the phone, we did return to the command post, and all the evidence was kept in my exclusive possession in my squad. I then transported all the evidence to the Calumet County Sheriff's Office, unquote. The burner phone became an afterthought as the murder investigation focused squarely on Avery, who was also taken into custody that same day, November 9. Incidentally, 3 days earlier, Colborn was also involved in the mysterious find at the creepy Maribel Caves Park. The secluded site is off the beaten path, but it was located in the same general area where Teresa may have encountered her attacker. It was another example of Colborne being called outside the comfort zone of Avery Road to an off-site location to collect suspicious evidence that would quickly fade into oblivion as far as the police investigators were concerned. Quote, I was approached by Sergeant Colborne and informed he had left the crime scene to meet with a citizen at the Marable Caves Park. Sergeant Colborne reported that the citizen found a piece of what appeared to be women's blue jeans and also found a plastic baggie containing a lubrication box. I informed Sergeant Colborne he should get me all the information on the citizen, and I would do an evidence sheet on that showing the exchange of custody, unquote. These mysterious blue jeans belonged to a female. Eerily, they had cut marks on them and bore a similar resemblance to the Daisy Fuentes clothing brand. And here's a picture that you can't really see much of the jeans at Marable. And that's where we come to an end for today. When we read the next time, we will start on chapter 11, which is page 109 out of 361. And let me tell you, for Marable Caves, so now when you're on 147, I'll take my glasses off now. When you're on 147, and then you turn left on Q to go to Cuss Road. If you turned right over near that way, that's where you get to the Marable Caves. So that's how close that all is. Something else I can show you. Where is it? I know I saw it here just recently. Now I don't see it. Damn it. It's right up here somewhere. Here it is. This is the exact same kind of vial that Stephen's blood had been stored in. Somebody goofed around with this, so the blood that's in it is now dried up and flaked down here. But, you know, and it even says on here, I don't know if you can see, will it focus on it? No, it won't focus on it. But it says there, you can see EDTA on it. So Jeff experimented with this, and I took video of it too when he did it. It was a couple years ago. So Jeff took his own blood and put it in here. And I have pictures that I took from that too when he did it. And so when Jeff did this a couple of years ago, it was very clear when he was done doing that you could see the hole in this. Okay? Which would be standard. That you would see the hole there. But seeing as now it's been like 3 years since he did that, you can no longer see the hole there. I mean, when I look really close, you can faintly see where maybe a hole had been put in there. But there's no obvious hole here any longer, years later. So does that mean, and this is a new thought that I'm having, because before I tossed out the thought of that blood being tampered with because we did the experiment, and by doing it, there was a hole in the top of this. But now, after sitting around for years, and like I said, it's been tampered with of some kind because, you know, I don't have any blood in it. The blood is all caked up here and but the hole is now gone. So, could they have gotten anything from this? And that now, when Buting opens that box and sees that hole, it's recent. Because, like, this is from 3 years ago, 4 years ago that Jeff did it, and the hole was there. I think Jeff has more of these. So we should do that test again. I know I had another one too somewhere around here. But we should try that again. Just for shits and giggles, Smurfs and giggles. But all right, so that's it of reading Story Time with Wrecking Crew. Yikes. I said the next time I would probably do it maybe Tuesday, because would not be able to do it on Monday due to it being a holiday here in the States. So, and I don't know if I'll pop on at any point and do a live to talk about our upcoming rally and if we have any drama to discuss. But for now, I will end this one and go relax with a nice snack of raspberries as trying to eat better, right? So thank you everybody for sitting with me for part 2 of Story Time of Wrecking Crew. Be on the lookout for the events for next week to continue reading along. If I don't talk to you before then, I hope everybody has a nice holiday weekend. Investigation continues. See ya.